Praise be Jesus Christ, now and forever. Last year around this time, I remember I recorded a nugget using the ancient Anglo-Saxon title of Christ as Winter Fire. I don't remember what I said, which is lucky for me, but perhaps not so much for you, as I'm sure I repeat myself quite often. I take consolation in the fact that, as I have indeed said before, we can always find something new in the Gospels, and perhaps even in words of others we've heard before. Attempting not to repeat myself, although still being greatly inspired by that lovely image of the Lord in this time of cold and darkness in the Western Hemisphere, I was struck this week by another image of fire, which helped my meditation. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses addresses the people, as he often has to, reminding them of God's goodness towards them and his great works. That's perhaps the first thought. We need that reminder, just as the Israelites did. We need it continually. We who are only too able and willing to complain about almost everything, and yet God has been so good to us. The miracles he's worked, the answer to prayers, and most importantly, and perhaps the thing we neglect most, his healing gifts in the sacraments and his real presence in the Eucharist. How can we ever complain of God's absence when we can walk into a church and see the tabernacle light burning and know with the certainty of faith that he is really there? However, as with the Israelites, so with us, our forgetfulness of God's goodness inevitably leads to misfortune. So those reminders are grace-filled and life-giving. Moses goes on with one other reminder that really struck me, that you might say, fired me up. He tells the people, speaking of God, "On earth he let you see his great fire, and from the heart of the fire you heard his word." Moses is speaking, of course, of the pillar of fire leading God's people through the desert, but also the voice speaking from its heart. However, Moses himself had also heard God's voice much earlier from a fire unconsumed, a fire that revealed the name of God, a fire in whose presence Moses was commanded to take off his shoes because he was on holy ground. This fire was the burning bush, one of the most powerful images in the entire Old Testament. The fire that leads, that inspires, that speaks. The fire that allows the voice of God to be heard from its heart. Something tells me that unless our parishes become the place where the fire is kindled in worship and mystery, where God's voice is heard in awesome silence and splendor, then we will lose any opportunity of inspiring his people. Priests, rather than being sacramental managers, must be fathers of the fire, those who tend the flames. Not to criticize the average parish too much, but let's be honest, is what we experience most of the time a burning fire or a flickering flame? It's something that the writer Rod Dreher is talking about when he calls for the re-enchantment of our world, something very easily experienced in the Orthodox Church, but much less in what has been rather cruelly but accurately called Catholic light. It is indeed what the emissaries of Prince Vladimir proclaimed on entering the Cathedral of the Holy Wisdom in Constantinople during the Divine Liturgy in the 10th century. "We knew not whether we were in heaven or on the earth." Time for us to become fire starters, not fire extinguishers. Brethren, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, like a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour.